You brought him to this engagement dinner. My sister laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. My mother smirked, scanning his clothes. Then her future father-in-law suddenly stood up and said, "Sir." And the room went silent. My name is Danielle Harper and I'm 34 years old. I work as a freelance technical writer and remote consultant. It's stable, honest work, but it doesn't come with a title that impresses anyone at dinner parties. I don't drive a flashy car. I don't post vacation photos every weekend. And for most of my life, my family treated that quietness like a flaw. My younger sister Priya was always the one they celebrated. She married into connections. She wore the right clothes to the right events. She knew how to perform success in a way that made everyone around her feel reflected in her shine. I was the other one, the practical one, the awkward one, the one who helped pay the household bills during the hard years while somehow still being treated like a disappointment. I spent most of my 20s helping my family financially after my father lost his business. I covered rent for 6 months. I sent money home while building my own career from nothing. Nobody talked about that at family dinners. What they talked about was how Priya got invited to a charity gala, or how her fiancé's family owned 3 companies. After a painful breakup and a complete career restart 3 years ago, I rebuilt myself slowly and carefully. I learned to value emotional intelligence over status. I learned that humility is not weakness. I chose peace over performance. And then I met Ethan. Bringing Ethan to that dinner wasn't about proving anything. It wasn't a statement or a strategy. It was simply the first time in years I had chosen my own happiness without asking my family's permission first. I wasn't rich or glamorous, but I had something they didn't expect. And neither did I, honestly, not yet. If you've ever brought someone you love into a room and watched people decide his worth before he spoke a single word, then you already know how this story starts. If your family has ever measured your choices by their own social scoreboard, this one is for you. I see you. I've been you. And if you're watching this right now feeling underestimated, I want you to stay with me because this story doesn't end where they expected it to. Before I continue, subscribe to this channel if you've ever dated someone others judged too quickly or lived a life people misread completely. And tell me in the comments, have people ever decided your worth before knowing your story? Like this video or click hype right now, and let's get into it. Priya's engagement dinner was held at a restaurant called All Divine, the kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices and the waitstaff speak in soft, rehearsed tones. Everything about the evening was designed to impress the Mercer family, her fiancé Daniel's people. They were old money, quiet power and very polished manners. Priya had been planning this dinner for weeks, down to the centerpieces and the seating chart. I arrived with Ethan at 7:15. He wore a navy button-down shirt and dark trousers. Clean, simple, calm, he looked like a man who had nothing to prove, which, as I would later understand, was exactly because he didn't. Priya spotted us near the entrance and her smile shifted into something sharp. She glanced at Ethan once, then looked back at me with that particular expression she had mastered since childhood, the one that said she found me embarrassing without needing to say it directly. "Oh," she said, "you actually brought him." She laughed, not quietly, loudly enough that 2 nearby tables turned to look. My mother appeared at her side within seconds, the way she always did when Priya needed backup. She looked Ethan up and down slowly, taking in his shirt, his shoes, his complete absence of visible wealth. "And what is it you actually do?" my mother asked him, her voice carrying the particular sweetness that meant she had already decided the answer didn't matter. Ethan smiled. "I consult," he said simply. That answer satisfied no one. I heard my aunt whisper to her husband, "Danielle always does this." I wasn't sure what this referred to exactly, but I understood the tone. We were escorted to seats at the far end of the long table near the wall away from the Mercer family's side. I noticed it immediately. So did Ethan. He said nothing. Priya spent the first 30 minutes introducing Daniel's relatives with visible pride, weaving in details about their portfolios and properties. She didn't introduce us to anyone. At one point she said, loudly enough for neighboring guests to hear, "Danielle never really aimed very high, but we love her anyway." People laughed politely. I felt the familiar heat rise in my chest. And then the door opened. A man walked in quietly late, adjusting his jacket. He was perhaps 60, silver-haired with the composed energy of someone accustomed to large rooms. Daniel's father, Mr. Gerald Mercer. He scanned the table as people greeted him, and then his eyes stopped. He stopped. He looked directly at Ethan and something moved across his face. Surprise, recognition, and something that looked very much like respect. He crossed the room without greeting anyone else first, extended his hand and said clearly, "Good evening, sir. I didn't know you'd be here." The table went quiet, not gradually, all at once. Afterward, my family decided I had planned the whole thing. "You knew he'd be there," Priya said to me later that night, her voice tight and low. "You did this on purpose to make me look bad at my own dinner." I hadn't planned anything. I hadn't even known Gerald Mercer would be attending, but explaining that felt pointless because Priya wasn't asking a question. She was building a story that kept her at the center of everything, including my choices. My mother called me the next morning. Her tone was careful, which meant she was managing me. "It would be better," she said, "if you left a little early next time, to avoid any awkwardness." I was the awkwardness, apparently. Not the table full of people who had whispered about Ethan's shoes, while a prominent man greeted him with formal respect. Later that week I overheard two relatives talking in my aunt's kitchen. They had decided that Ethan must work for the Mercer family in some service capacity, which was why Gerald had been polite to him. "Gerald's very proper," my aunt explained. "He'd greet anyone that way." They nodded, satisfied, problem solved, status restored. Then Priya called and told me directly that she didn't want Ethan at any future wedding events. "It's just cleaner," she said. "You understand." I didn't argue, I just listened. What I noticed instead was this. At Aldevine that night, 2 different staff members had greeted Ethan before we were even seated. Not me, him. One of them had said, "Good to see you again, Mr. Caldwell," and then moved on so quickly that I hadn't registered it fully until now. I thought about the phone calls Ethan stepped away to take at quiet moments, always brief, always calm, always followed by him returning to my side without explanation. I had stopped apologizing for Ethan somewhere between my mother's phone call and my sister's demand. I wasn't sure exactly when it happened, but I noticed the shift in myself. I stopped rehearsing defenses. I started paying attention instead. Something was becoming clear, and I decided to let it become clear on its own. Ethan had mentioned once early in our relationship that he worked with companies going through significant transitions, crisis periods. He said it the way someone mentions the weather, without drama. He never brought it up again and I hadn't pressed. He valued his privacy. I respected that, partly because I understood it and partly because his calm made me feel safe in a world that had always felt slightly too loud. But after the dinner I began to understand the shape of what he hadn't told me. I reached out carefully, asking small questions, and what emerged was this. Ethan had spent the past decade as a strategic advisor to mid-size and large companies navigating collapse. He didn't manage people. He repositioned entire business structures. Quietly, without press releases or LinkedIn announcements. What they didn't know was Ethan wasn't trying to impress anyone. He never had been. He'd walked into Aldevine the same way he walked into every room, as himself, with no performance attached. And somewhere in that history of quiet work, he had been brought in to advise the Mercer family's flagship company during a period of serious financial instability. He had helped stabilize it. Gerald Mercer knew exactly who Ethan was. He had known the moment he saw him across that restaurant. The irony was almost too clean. My sister had arranged that entire dinner to showcase the Mercer family's prestige, and the most respected man in that room had walked past everyone else to greet my boyfriend first. I sat with this knowledge quietly. My family was growing louder in their certainty that they had put things back in order. I said nothing. I was not in a rush. My cousin Rachel had always been the family's inconvenient witness. She noticed things people preferred weren't noticed, and she had the habit of saying them out loud at the wrong moments, which meant she spent most family gatherings slightly outside the main circle. I had always liked her for exactly this reason. Rachel texted me 3 days after the engagement dinner. "I need to show you something," she wrote. She screenshotted a group chat she had been added to for Priya's wedding planning. I was not in this group. The messages were not kind. Several relatives had speculated that Ethan was a charity case I had romanticized into a relationship. One aunt had written, "Classic Danielle making everything." G about herself, Priya had responded with a single laughing emoji. Rachel wrote to me, "Don't disappear this time, please, don't let them win by default." I had done that before, withdrawn, avoided the next event, the next gathering, the next opportunity to be compared and found lacking. It had always felt like self-protection. Rachel was right that it had never actually protected me. It had just made the narrative easier for everyone else to maintain. Weeks passed. The wedding rehearsal dinner invitation arrived in my email with a note attached from Priya's wedding coordinator listing a set of behavioral expectations for guests. It was addressed to specific people. I was on that list. The note suggested guests avoid distracting conversations and keep the focus on the couple. I almost laughed. Rachel called me that same afternoon. "Did you know," she said, her voice carrying the energy of someone who had just learned something significant, "that Ethan is listed as a special business guest on Daniel's side of the reception program? The Mercer family requested him specifically. He's not just your +1, Danielle. He's on the official guest list." I was quiet for a moment. "Yes," I said, "I think I did know that actually." The family had no idea. They were still operating inside a story they had written in the first 10 minutes of that dinner. They were confident now. Priya had mentioned to Rachel that Danielle seemed to finally understand her place. They were relaxed, which meant they were not paying attention. The reception was going to be uncomfortable for several of them. I understood that, but I was done managing other people's discomfort at the expense of my own dignity. That season had ended. The wedding reception was held at the Coldwell Grand, a venue with high ceilings, warm amber lighting, and the faint smell of gardenias arranged in tall glass vases throughout the hall. The room held nearly 200 people, a mixture of extended family and what I can only describe as Daniel's father's professional world: investors, executives, advisors, people who did not take their status lightly. I arrived with Ethan. I wore deep green. He wore a charcoal suit that I had not seen before, tailored, quiet, and unmistakably considered. He looked exactly like what he was, which was the problem for everyone who had already decided what he wasn't. My mother saw us from across the room and did a slow, visible recalibration of her expression. Priya was near the main table with Daniel, and when she caught my eye, she smiled the way people smile when they're not sure what's happening but don't want to show it. The evening moved forward, dinner was served, speeches began. Priya stood during the early toast portion of the evening and spoke warmly about Daniel, about their future, about family. And then, in the middle of what should have been a gracious moment, she added, "I'm just grateful Daniel chose someone who, unlike some people in my life, actually has real ambition." She laughed lightly. Several people laughed with her. I did not look away from her, I held her gaze calmly. Then Gerald Mercer stood up. The room adjusted. When Gerald Mercer stood, people listened. He thanked the guests, honored his son, and then he paused. "There's someone in this room," he said, "who most of you don't know by name, but our company does. 3 years ago, when Mercer Holdings was facing a restructuring crisis that could have ended 40 years of work, one advisor came in without fanfare, without a press team, and without a single demand for credit. He rebuilt our framework. He is the reason this wedding is happening in a stable household." He turned and looked directly at Ethan. "Ethan Coldwell," Gerald said clearly, "would you stand, please?" Ethan stood. This man mentors CEOs. He has restructured companies across 4 industries. And tonight he is here as a guest, not because we hired him, but because he matters to someone in this family. We are grateful to have him in this room. The applause was immediate and genuine from the Mercer side of the room. My family's side was very quiet. My mother turned toward me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was the precise look of someone recalculating everything they had said in the last 6 weeks. Priya's jaw was set. She was working through something visibly, trying to find the recovery line, the graceful reframe. There wasn't one available. Ethan accepted the acknowledgement briefly and sat down, then he turned to me, not to the room. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said, and I meant it in a way I hadn't felt in years. My mother leaned toward me from 2 seats away. "Danielle, you should have told us," she whispered, as though the problem had been my silence and not her judgment. I looked at her. "You didn't ask," I said. Then I stood. I hadn't planned to speak, but I was standing and the room was still slightly rear-angy. NG itself, and I had 34 years of being the quiet one pressing behind my sternum. "I want to say something," I said, clearly enough that the nearby tables heard me. People looked. Priya looked. I've spent most of my adult life being compared to a version of success that this family decided was the only valid one. I helped carry this family through hard years. I rebuilt my own life without asking anyone to applaud it. I brought a man I loved to a dinner, and watched my own family mock him loudly enough for strangers to hear. And I didn't say anything then, because I was still trying to keep peace with people who were not extending the same courtesy to me. I paused, the room was very still. I don't need anyone here to validate my choices, I never needed that. But I want to be clear, I'm not invisible, I never was, and I won't be sitting at the far end of the table anymore. I sat down. The applause that followed came from the Mercer family side, from Rachel, from two people I didn't even recognize. My family's side was silent. Priya opened her mouth twice and closed it again. The moment was not recoverable and she knew it. The dinner continued. Priya tried, near the end of the evening, to walk over and reframe the moment as a misunderstanding, but the conversation was awkward and brief, and both of us knew it. I left the reception before 11. Ethan and I walked out into the cool night air together. I didn't feel triumphant exactly. What I felt was lighter. Significantly, permanently lighter. Rachel hugged me at the door. I'm proud of you, she said. Something permanent had shifted, and not just in how my family saw me, in how I saw myself. I had spent so long seeking their approval that I had confused their silence with authority, but they had no authority over who I was or who I loved. They never had. In the weeks that followed, the distance between me and most of my family settled into something quiet and mutual. My mother called occasionally. The calls were shorter now, careful, as if she were navigating a room she had redecorated without a blueprint. Priya and I exchanged polite messages around shared family logistics. Nothing more. Rachel and I talked regularly. She had her own version of this story, her own years of being treated as the family footnote, and we were building something honest between us that felt nothing like what I had been chasing for decades. What I understood now was this: dignity is not something other people hand you when they finally decide you've earned it. It lives in the choices you make when nobody is applauding you. It lives in the years you stay true to yourself while a room full of people mislabel everything about you. They laughed when I walked in, but respect followed when I finally stopped asking for theirs. If your family has ever looked at who you love and decided the story before it was told, I want to hear from you. If someone has mocked your partner, your career, your choices, and you've sat through it quietly while burning inside, this comment section belongs to you tonight. Tell me, has someone ever underestimated you or the person you love? Drop it below. Let's hear each other. And if this story reached something real in you, click hype right now. Help it find the next person who needs to hear it. Your story has power. The fact that you've been underestimated doesn't diminish you. It just means the people watching weren't paying close enough attention. I'm paying attention. This community pays attention. Subscribe if you want more stories told honestly, without pretense, without performance. Thank you for being here tonight. Click hype one more time on your way out, so another person who has been quietly carrying too much can find this story and feel a little less alone.